I'd like to welcome our speakers, Maria Daniela Hurtado Andrade of the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, and Dr. Carolina Povian of Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School in Boston, Massachusetts. In addition, we'd like to thank Eli Lilly and Company for providing support for this event. So with that, I will turn things over to Dr. Hurtado Andrade.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm very excited to be here and present about this important topic. You can continue to advance. Okay, so today we're going to talk about anti-obesity medications and as it relates to compounded products. I have a couple disclosures that I would like to share. I have participated in advisory boards for Novo Nordisk, and I receive research support from Phenomic Sciences and the National Institutes of Health. The new generation of anti-obesity medications are characterized by very effective products, especially when it comes to GLP-1 receptor agonists. Clinical trials have found that patients can lose anywhere between 15 and 20% of their body weight on average, with some patients losing much more than that. The importance of these medications and why they are becoming more popular is that they not only reduce weight, but they can also be associated with improvements in health as it relates to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, as well as other weight related complications. Go forward, Jenny, please. We probably do not need to highlight the impact of this obesity epidemic. So far, we know that in 23 states, more than 1 in 3 adults is living with obesity, according to the CDC. Based on the data from 2021 to 2023, more than 40% of US adults are living with obesity, and about 1 out of 5 children and adolescents are also living with obesity. And let's not forget about the impact of this epidemic. The annual healthcare costs of obesity have been estimated as 1,480 billion for direct healthcare costs and 1.2 trillion for indirect healthcare costs. Advance. Why are GLP-1s becoming so popular? Yes, they are very effective anti-obesity medications, but it has been demonstrated that these GLP-1 receptor agonists can also have effects on your body that extend beyond weight reduction. Next. The way these medications work to reduce weight is by interacting with receptors in the brain that will increase satiety and reduce appetite. In the intestine, these medications also regulate GI motility, they slow gastric emptying, and by reducing gastric emptying, patients tend to feel full for longer, and as a result, they lose weight. Next. As I was telling you, the effect extend beyond weight loss. The effect of these medications in the pancreas and liver have been shown to have very beneficial effects when it comes to glycemic or glucose control, and this is why these medications are also approved for type 2 diabetes treatment. Next. Then we recently heard about the select data of semaglutide, the effect of semaglutide on cardiovascular outcomes in patients with established cardiovascular disease, showing that the medication is associated with improved cardiovascular outcomes. And this is probably related to not only the effect on weight loss, but there is also maybe a weight independent effect mediated by the direct effect of GLP-1 on cardiovascular physiology, especially when it comes to inflammation in the body. Next. And finally, the effect of GLP-1 on adipose tissue is also taking care of the core of what we call adiposopathy, which is the inflammation that is mediated by excess adipose tissue, and that also causes many, or is at least a risk factor for many of the diseases associated with obesity. Next. GLP-1s are not new medications for the treatment of obesity. In the early 2010s, liraglutide was approved for the treatment of obesity. And this is a daily GLP-1 receptor agonist. And as you can see in this figure, the placebo-subtracted weight loss was 5.4% with the maximum dose of 3 milligrams daily. Next. Later on, semaglutide was approved for the treatment of obesity based on the STEP 1 trial, which showed that the maximum dose of 2.4 milligrams weekly led to a placebo-subtracted weight loss of 12.5%. So we can already see that the placebo-subtracted weight loss is much greater for semaglutide, which is one of these newer GLP-1 receptor agonists. Next. And finally, tirzepatide was the last one to be approved, and the pivotal trial, the SURMOUNT-1 trial, demonstrated that the placebo-subtracted weight loss after 72 weeks was 17.6%. So as these medications come to the market, we can see that their effectiveness is also increasing. And there haven't been any head-to-head trials comparing semaglutide to tirzepatide, but there has been a head-to-head trial comparing semaglutide and liraglutide, showing, of course, semaglutide's superiority. Next. Another way of seeing the data is looking at the percentage of patients that are able to achieve a certain amount of weight loss. And just to show how effective these medications are coming, here I'm presenting the data on the amount of patients that can achieve more than 15% body weight loss. For liraglutide, it was 1.5 out of 10 patients that were able to achieve more than 15% weight loss. With semaglutide, it's 5 out of 10, and for tirzepatide, it's 8 out of 10. Next. As these medications started to become more effective, then we were reporting better outcomes. The number of patients that were able to achieve more than 20% body weight loss. And with semaglutide is 1 out of 3, and for tirzepatide is 1 out of 2. Next. And of course, with the effectiveness of tirzepatide, their company also looked at the amount of, or at the proportion of patients that are able to achieve more than 25% body weight loss, and it was 1 out of 3. So as you can see, these medications are becoming more effective with weight loss outcomes that approximate those that we see with endoscopic bariatric procedures and even with bariatric surgery. Next. Given the effectiveness of these medications for weight loss, but also their effects on other organ systems, there has been an increasing demand. There was 1.1 billion in net sales of all anti-obesity medications in the second quarter of 2023. Next. And of course, GLP-1 receptor agonist use has some limitations. So first of all, they are very expensive medications, and in the US market, to meet cost effectiveness, GLP-1 receptor agonists will require a discount from the wholesale acquisition cost of 24 to 36% for diabetes and 44 to 75% for obesity. Next. There is also limited insurance coverage, particularly when it comes to the coverage of these medications for the treatment of overweight and obesity. And Medicare is currently prohibited by law from covering anti-obesity medications, which makes it more difficult for patients, especially as they age. And finally, we all are aware of the supply issues that we have been having with these medications to the demand outpacing manufacturing and availability. And what is more impressive to me is that this decreased accessibility is higher for the highest risk populations. Next.
Okay, so are we,
I was going to say, if you want to take over from here, I believe Dr.
yes,
Apovian.
I'm Carolina Povian. Thank you, Dr. Andrade. I'm going to talk about, now we're going to move into the compounding issue that has occurred in the United States, really primarily because of the demand and the availability has not met the demand. And so there are compounding pharmacies that have um, that are trying to meet this demand. Where are these compounded drugs coming from? They're coming from other parts of the world, and they're coming into the United States. So first, what you need to know is that looks as if 1 in 4 adults, based on questionnaire, would consider using an injectable weight loss medication without consulting their doctor. So there is this. I think this comes from not understanding, and we've failed in our education efforts over the past 30 years to um, to imparting on the public and doctors and the government that obesity is a disease. This is a disease. It's not a matter of willpower. People are having trouble losing weight, both people without obesity and people with obesity, but these drugs are meant for the disease. And we have failed as a medical community in imparting that. And therefore, we see that 1 in 4 adults, maybe even more, would consider using one of these powerful drugs without consulting their doctor. And the reasons cited include a cost issue. So if you see your doctor and you get a prescription medication, it's not covered by your insurance. These drugs are $1,000 a month. Okay, so can we have the next slide, please? The proper use is also at issue. If obesity is a disease, which we all, we understand it to be a disease, then these drugs, if they do reduce your body weight set point by, as Dr. Andrade has indicated, up to 20% lower, so a 20% body weight reduction, unfortunately, it looks as if a third of patients stop treatment within 4 weeks. This doesn't help matters. There are other reports that suggest that patients are stopping treatment after 9 months, after 6 to 9 months, something like that. And findings suggest that many individuals don't stay on their prescribed treatment for at least 12 weeks, which is the estimated time that it takes to see a 5% weight loss if the medication is going to work. So Dr. Andrade has gave you the categorical weight losses and the mean weight losses. It just means that people lose less weight and more weight than the mean. And those people who lose less weight than the mean, we track. If you don't lose at least 5% in 12 weeks of your original body weight, then we need to know that. We need to either add something or switch medications. So if you don't stay on the drug long enough, we're not going to know. This is improper use of these very important anti-obesity medications. We have an opportunity to change the way medicine is practiced in the United States as long as doctors are given the means by which to change practice. And right now, compounded medication is not helping that future achievement. Now, those who completed 12 weeks of treatment, interestingly enough, saw healthcare providers more frequently than patients who did not. This makes sense, doesn't it? If you see your provider, you will be given the education to understand how to use these weight loss medications. Thank you. Next slide, please. So therefore, there's an important role for the endocrinologist and primary care if the primary care is willing to take on the treatment of obesity, which right now they're not, because they really don't have the time or the resources in their clinics to do so. But this is important for the endocrinologist to help the patient stay on the medication long enough for it to work and to manage the side effects, which we'll talk about, and to help navigate reimbursement and pharmacy supply questions. Now, this is a tall order. It takes, I do this on a regular basis. So does Dr. Andrade. And we have a whole team of people helping us navigating prior authorizations and reimbursement, pharmacy supply. And it is onerous work. And we wish we didn't have to do this. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about compounded medications. What are they? These are made by, pharmacies. The ingredients of a drug are combined, mixed, or altered to create a medication tailored to a patient. That's the general definition. made by or under the supervision of a licensed pharmacist, hopefully, and meant to be an alternative when an individual does not have access to or has an adverse reaction to a medication approved by the Food and Drug Administration. But what we know they're being used for is for the shortage. So the FDA has now allowed compounded medications to be available under a registered pharmacy because of the shortage of semaglutide and tirzepatide in the United States. Next slide.
Dr. Hurtado Andrade, I know you were going to talk about this as well. Do you have anything to add before we move on?
No, nothing to add.
Okay. What are the concerns about compounding? First and foremost, they don't undergo the FDA pre-market review for safety, quality, and effectiveness. But number one is safety. There is a potential, therefore, for variations in compounded medication. And the FDA recently issued an alert concerning compounded semaglutide. In fact, Novo Nordisk has just announced that there has been at least 10 deaths attributed to compounded semaglutide. The FDA is reviewing these, and the FDA, unfortunately, can only come in when there has been these deaths. So that has already happened where they're under review. Next slide. Okay. There's also been an alert from the FDA of reported dosing errors involving compounded semaglutide, and that many patients were unfamiliar with self-injectable medications. Now, usually these compounded medications come in vials, and you have to use a syringe and a needle to draw up the appropriate dose. Now, we don't know how the deaths occurred, and we don't know if it was dosing errors or something else. Next slide. Okay. The shortages have already eased up. And we also use older anti-obesity medications in our practices. But if you're not used to using our older medications, i.e., you are not an obesity medicine specialist, you haven't trained in obesity medicine, you wouldn't know what the older medications are. The older medications are still out there. They have been FDA approved. They're known as phentermine topiramate, phentermine alone, bupropion, naltrexone. And these are oral medications that can be very helpful. The mean weight losses aren't as great as our naturally occurring gut hormones that have really changed the landscape in obesity medicine, but they are still very helpful. Next slide. Okay, here they are. I neglected to talk about orlistat, which is a fat blocker. It's also out there. So what are they? Phentermine, adrenergic. It causes, increase in blood pressure and pulse. Orlistat, a lipase inhibitor, can cause some GI side effects. Very safe drug, however. Phentermine combined with topiramate, so they each cancel each other's side effects out. But the side effects of topiramate can be memory loss and paresthesias. Bupropion, naltrexone, excellent medication, specifically helpful for patients with binging and addiction to sugar. Also can treat smoking and depression. Liraglutide, as Dr. Andrade already mentioned, the daily injectable, semaglutide and tirzepatide. Next slide. All right, now here is a graph showing the weight loss for these drugs. Now remember that these are average weight losses and categorical weight losses. So, what do we know about this? We see that, all right, let me put this on so I can see this. Okay, and these are comparing the drugs to bariatric surgery. After all, we learned everything we know about these GLP-1s from studying the why bariatric surgery works. So why does bariatric surgery work? It works not from a restriction, not from malabsorption, like we used to think. It works because the surgery alters the secretion of these hormones so that you feel full with less food. All right. So on the left-hand side, we have the duodenal switch, 40% weight loss. Incredible. The Roux-Y gastric bypass, 35% weight loss. The sleeve gastrectomy, 30% weight loss. Okay. And then now these other things in the middle here are endoscopic. The endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty, a little less weight loss in the balloon, 15% weight loss, but when you take out the balloon, you regain that weight. So why are we doing this balloon? Okay, then we have our drugs. Notice how great great the weight loss is for tirzepatide and semaglutide, nearly coming very as close as we can to bariatric surgery. We're probably going to end up getting even closer when our dual and triple agonists come out in the next few years. But this is why, if you see this graph, you see why the explosion in medications for obesity occurred with the approval of semaglutide or Wegovy, because we jumped up by 50% the weight reduction. Now, are you going to, obesity is a disease. These surgeries are permanent. The medications are also permanent, meaning you need to keep taking the medication, just like if you had hypertension and your blood pressure went from 150 to 120 because you took lisinopril. If you stop taking the lisinopril, the blood pressure goes back up, right? Right. So if you take these medications and you get down to a good weight that you're happy with and you stop them, yeah, your body remembers the weight that it wants to be in this environment and you regain that weight. Because these drugs, as Dr. Andrade mentioned, are satiety agents. They help the body reduce the body weight set point as long as you take them. Next slide. All right. This is an obesity playbook that can help with any, questions, and talks about obesity, the disease, and why it's not a matter of willpower. And so I think with that, we open it up to the floor, don't we, Jenny?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Apovian and Dr. Hurtado Andrade. This was really helpful. And I just wanted to let the reporters know, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to contact our team at media@endocrine.org, and we're happy to share copies of this obesity playbook with additional resources if that's helpful. Great. So I'll now turn things over to Colleen Williams, our Senior Communications Manager, to spearhead our Q&A. Oh, it looks like Colleen has a poor connection. So if you can go ahead and type any questions in the chat, and I'll go ahead and start with a few things. Dr. Apovian and Dr. Hurtado Andrade, can you tell us a little bit about how do you work with patients who are dealing with anti-obesity medication shortages at their pharmacy?
I can start. To be honest with you, from the clinical practice perspective, it has been very challenging, especially in 2022, 2023. Now things are getting better. But as obesity medicine experts, we do have a toolbox that allow us to consider what is safest and most optimal for a patient. For example, when we initially were dealing with shortages of semaglutide, either for diabetes or for weight management, we were trying to transition our patients to either liraglutide or tirzepatide for each indication, respectively. However, as the problems started becoming more and more obvious, including with liraglutide and of course also with tirzepatide, then the conversation surrounds about what other options we can offer. And as Dr. Apovian was discussing, we have a very great toolbox to offer to our patients. Other anti-obesity medications are a great option. Patients often are not familiar because these medications may not be as effective as the injectables, but we need to keep in mind that the effectiveness of these medications vary from person to person. And some patients may come to us expecting to lose 15, 20% weight loss with semaglutide or tirzepatide, but the reality is that they may be non-responders and they may lose a suboptimal amount of weight loss. And we see the same with other medications. Even though the weight loss is 10%, there are patients that are going to do much better, maybe lose 15, 20, even 30% of their weight. Talking about the pros, the cons, it's very important to discuss these issues. When we were going through the worst part of the shortages, I had a policy of not prescribing these medications because it can be challenging for patients who have been living with this disease, and they are trying to turn things around. And it can be very frustrating if you cannot access that tool that will allow you to achieve the lifestyle changes that are needed in order for you to be successful in the long term. Talking about options is extremely important. So I use other anti obesity medications. I think these newer medications are excellent options with benefits that extend beyond weight loss, but is that the right medication for everyone struggling with the disease? And the answer is no. At the end of the day, the choice of medication will depend on, of course, if there is an indication for an anti-obesity medication, what are the weight loss goals? Because if patients don't want to lose 21%, or if they are hoping to be able to move a little bit better, they may not need to lose 21% of their weight. They may be able to get away with much lower amount of weight loss, and then other medications could be more appropriate. And then let's not forget that there are things beyond medications, like Dr. Apovian mentioned, endoscopic bariatric procedures, bariatric surgery as well.
Great. Dr. Apovian, do you have anything to add before we take a few questions from the
No, that
chat?
was great.
Wonderful. So we have a question from Emily Mullen at Wired. She says, "Hi, thanks so much for doing this. My colleague and I are working on a story about oral compounded GLP-1 products that are proliferating online. Telehealth outfits are offering all sorts of pills, gels, drops, etc. Can you address the efficacy of these products given the difference in bioavailability with oral versus injectable forms?"
Okay. So, first of all, um, can I address the efficacy of these products? What can I say? They haven't been studied. So, I don't know what's in this stuff. What I do know is what I'm hearing is that they're taking is that these these people these outfits are taking uh, stuff that's out there and putting them into different forms and giving it to patients orally and drops and stuff. And there are these blister packs I'm hearing about that have been proliferating in Rhode Island. And really, I think people are trying to make money, and they are because of the demand and desperation, really, of patients who have obesity, and their insurance won't cover the real thing. So I would recommend that you really do your research and maybe see what's out there and look and see what these products, what they're doing, what they're putting in these products. But I don't go near these products, and we didn't even, we can't even go to bioavailability if we don't know what's in the stuff, right? So there's no the research is being done now on with pharmaceutical companies that are spending millions of dollars researching the bioavailability of orals to make sure they're safe and effective. Number one, safe. And in order to do that, they're spending a lot of money to make sure that the FDA has all the data. And so I think that this is these outfits are really damaging uh, the doing a lot of damage to the science and to doctors who are trying to be safe and giving patients something that's effective and safe. So I am against all of these products. We have no idea what's in them, no idea about bioavailability.
And I echo what Dr. Apovian said. The truth is that these compounding pharmacies sometimes are trying to develop technologies that have not been tested based on the standard clinical practices as it relates to research. And I wouldn't be willing to prescribe something to my patients that I do not know it is safe. Our job as doctors or healthcare providers is to make sure that we are doing something safe,
Mhm.
no harm to our patients. I do not consider them, I do not prescribe them, and I do not endorse them. And when patients come to see me already on these type of products, I do try to educate them on the importance of using something that is safer
Now,
and
there are
proved.
some people out there who feel that if you're an adult and you're mentally sane, that it should be okay that you do these things if you know the risk and the benefit. And I don't agree with that. I think that if, yes, you can go out there and smoke, that's okay, but no doctor is going to condone that. And so I think no doctor should condone the use of these products.
Emily did ask, what would you recommend that patients do if they're afraid of needles?
Well, first of all, I've had we saw 12,000 patients last year, my team and I, for obesity. Not one patient after being shown the product, semaglutide or tirzepatide, not one said they wouldn't use it. You don't even see the needle and you don't even feel the needle. But again, you have to educate the patient. If, and again, we've had 0 patients when shown this needle, supposed needle, they didn't, they agreed to use it. But if in case people really just don't even want to see it, we have oral medications
Mhm.
that if you're a uh, obesity medicine specialist, you know how to use. And again, they're not products, they're prescription medication meant to be prescribed by a doctor.
Great, thank you. I have a question from Eric Swain at Endocrine Today. He asks, if a patient has used a compounded drug successfully, how can they be persuaded to switch to a quote proper version, especially if their insurance coverage is not adequate?
I think this is probably the most challenging patient that I see in clinical practice. Um, Patients come to us with these compounded products. Many times they don't know their origin. They don't know if they are from certified companies. Many are given by med spas, and they are mixed with vitamins, vitamin B, because this is something that is actually commonly done in these practices. Again, to me, everything comes down to putting on a scale, weighing risks and benefits. And I'm going to tell you, after proper education, many patients will understand the risks associated with these medications. There are not only other tools, but now there are perhaps we're seeing that the prices of some of these medications are coming down. Eli Lilly has availability of the two lower doses for lower costs. It is true they are still very expensive, but you would be impressed how many other patients would be willing to consider the other anti-obesity medications that are cheaper and also effective. Let's not forget that we can do combination of anti-obesity medications. And when you combine two of the cheaper older generation anti-obesity medications, sometimes you can get effectiveness that approximates semaglutide or even tirzepatide. So there are options. And most patients with proper education will be able to be persuaded about the risks. I'm not going to lie. I have patients that after coming to me and inquiring about these options still don't come back to us. They are still willing to consider these products because they are seeing benefits.
Okay. What are the concerns with using anti-obesity medications without consulting a physician?
You mean online or
Well, I mean,
the
an obesity specialist, what would you say are
yeah.
the risks there?
Well, the data shows that there's probably an an inappropriate usage of these medications that patients who don't go through an obesity medicine specialist will get a prescription maybe and then not be and get no other education. And so um, those patients who are lucky enough to understand good nutrition and understand that exercise is a very important part of any weight management program during and in order to maintain the weight may do well. But those patients who um, don't understand how these medications, the mechanism of action of the medications, and also how they're to be used maximally for the maximal response, will not understand that what these medications do, they just add a little bit more satiety hormone to move the balance and help you achieve a lower body weight in this environment. And once you achieve that lower weight, it's important to stay on the medication. Many people who uh, got these medications without an MD, I'm going to say really people like Elon Musk and other actresses who just want to look better in their outfits, then they stop the medication when they achieve that weight loss. And then they certainly see that after a short period of time, they're regaining the weight back. So I think that is the number one reason why, you should see a physician for your medication is because you want to understand how to use the medication. But also, if you get a side effect, for example, when Wegovy first came out, even those of us in the field had patients end up in the emergency room with small bowel obstruction and ileus. Why? Because we didn't realize that the constipation in some patients was going to be so onerous that they developed obstructions. It was rare, but when it happened, it was pretty serious. So now we know, and now we don't have people who come into our centers getting that kind of constipation because we train, we educate on what to do if you do get constipated. That's just an example of what can happen when you get a prescription and you're not apprised of the side effects and what to do about them.
Great. Dr. Hurtado Andrade, do you have anything to add?
To me, it comes down to the side effects and, of course, contraindications, right? There are established contraindications and certain things that we need to look out when we are prescribing these medications. But side effects are extremely common. If patients are not well educated on the side effects, those are the patients that are very likely to stop the medication. Um, so that support is important. Um, and otherwise, no, I agree with what Dr. Apovian said. We need to make sure that we use these medications long term and that patients get the support they need to succeed long term.
Great. Well, I'm sorry, one more question in our chat. This one is from Kate Reuter, who's a freelance journalist. Are there compounding pharmacies in the US, perhaps with state licensure or other types of certifications, that are making GLP-1s safely?
This compounding process and regulation is very complex. To be honest with you, I have tried reading and understanding what it entails. And, there are licensed pharmacies that could make compounded products. But being a licensed pharmacy that can make a compounded product does not make you a good, company that is able to make these very difficult to compound products, right? Semaglutide is difficult to compound. As a matter of fact, Novo Nordisk has submitted a request that semaglutide is added to this category of drug products that present demonstrable difficulties for compounding. So these pharmacies can stop making semaglutide. Um, so even though they are certified, are they making it right? They are supposed to have the right processes and they take the safety measures that they are supposed to make these compounds sterile. But it's hard to know if they are making the right product. And the FDA doesn't have a way of proving that this is the right product because they are not doing clinical trials to demonstrate their effectiveness and overall safety in the long term.
Yeah, I agree. It comes down to using the the tools available in the United States, which is the FDA is there to protect you. Period. If the FDA doesn't can't look at these products and see if they're safe or not, you're not protected. And again, we've had several deaths already from compounded drugs that are being researched by the FDA.
Great. Thank you both. I think that's all the questions in our queue. So again, we're very grateful to both of our speakers and to all the journalists who joined us today. This was a really interesting discussion. And thank you again to Eli Lilly and Company for providing support for this event. Oh,
I
I'm sorry,
think,
there is one more question.
there's two more.
Okay, let's see if we can answer these before we close out here. Let's see. So I have one from Harika Rayala at ABC News. How prevalent are compounded GLP-1 medications? And you touched on this earlier, but what's the most common source? Telehealth companies, pharmacies, etc.
Well, they're not, that prevalent compared to the prescription medications. So they're not a huge part of the market share yet, and maybe they won't be. And the most common source, I really, from my vantage point, what I see patients doing is the telehealth companies, His and Hers, Row, even some of the other less well known, the med spas out there, even the ones where you go in, such as the med spas. But I don't have any proof of any of this. I don't know, Dr. Andrade, do you know anything more?
No, I wouldn't have any data specifically on that, not on the top of my head.
Hmm.
Okay, but anecdotally, you're seeing more people using the compounding pharmacies, Dr. Apovian.
Yeah, I mean, they're not certainly. We saw 12,000 patients last year. The ones that are using compounded medications, many of them are not coming to us, right? But of those that are, they're coming to us because they want to First of all, ensure that what they're doing is safe, and we always tell them, "We don't know." The patients who are, um, doing well, let's say doing well, i.e., they're alive, and, sorry to have to say that, but it's true. They're losing weight. What I tell those patients is, you know, it's working for you. You haven't had side effects. I can't vouch for what you're on. However, it's up to you if you want to stay on it. I'm not going to prescribe a compounded medication. We are not, we don't do that as licensed physicians um, in our Harvard system. We don't do that. So you can do it if you want to. And that's where I leave it up to the libertarian, the libertarian philosophy, which is, you're an adult, you're mentally stable, you can make your own decision. But I recommend that they not, if they want my advice.
Great. So I have one more question from freelance journalist Kathleen Doheny. Would putting both those drugs on the DDC list solve the problem?
I think it's also a difficult question to answer because um, theoretically, these are medications that are in shortage. So theoretically, these certified compounding pharmacies are able to make it and they can find ways of going around. This system is not perfect. So even if shortages stop, let's say base case scenario, we don't have any shortages, Lilly and Novo Nordisk are able to keep up with demand. These compounded pharmacies can create personalized products that, for example, will allow them to add vitamin B12 to the compounded semaglutide. And since that is not a commercially available product, they are theoretically allowed to do that as long as they think there is a clinical benefit. Now, the definition of clinical benefit is not clear. Is there a clinical benefit to adding B12? I personally do not think there is, but if a doctor is able to provide some argument as that is the case, they could be allowed to do that. So I don't understand the regulatory process, and I'm not going to try to understand it for now. I already have a lot going on from the clinical and research perspective, but it's hard to know. I'm sure that they can find another way of being able to get this done.
Great.
Agree.
See, well, that is all the questions we have in the queue. So again, thank you to our speakers. We really appreciate you making the time to be here today, as well as our journalist attendees. Thank you for joining us. And again, we're grateful to Eli Lilly and Company for their support. This recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the coming days, so you're able to go back and watch it. And it also will be available in this Matchbox platform for about a couple of months if you need to come back and review anything. To set up an interview with our experts or ask any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to our staff at media@endocrine.org. Thank you again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank